Hello, hello, hello. So this video, my name is George, and this video I'm going to be talking about AI visibility. Um, AI visibility is kind of like the SEO practice, what was for Google, but for avenues like ChatGPT. Now, the first thing to make clear to everyone is that ChatGPT is a generative or conversational AI, and it's currently in competition with a bunch of other conversational AIs. So you've got Google Gemini, you've got Grok, you've got ChatGPT, and you've got a whole bunch of others. And they're currently competing for user base that'll continue to use them over time. So a good example of where that's happened before is how Google is the dominant search engine to Bing. And for that reason, when people think of doing search advertising or SEO, they normally gravitate towards doing Google's best practices rather than Bing's best practices. So we're kind of early in determining which marketing channel we're going to be using for the future. But let's just say that ChatGPT is the dominant channel, and that's where we should be focusing our efforts. So what I mean by visibility or AI visibility is if you have a business, does it appear when people have conversations with ChatGPT? And it's really hard to understand whether you will come up on ChatGPT or you won't, because there's a lot more context when you're having a conversation that goes on for a bunch of messages compared to search. However, I am of the belief, and I don't know, I could be wrong, that there are some similarities between how ChatGPT is used versus Google. So if you look at this now, we're looking at a search bar. We've seen it all before. The only difference is we know that when we type in search here, we're allowed to keep asking questions, and we basically build on what we're asking it through a conversation, which is not something that Google can do. However, if you want to show up first in ChatGPT, I believe the most important place to show up is to show up first when somebody asks for that thing that you're not, where they're not confident in, right? So as an example, let's say that I am in, product management and marketing, and I ask a random question about flowers. In that case, I don't really have much of a profile on flowers. So what ChatGPT is going to serve me is its best opinion of what I'd like to see for flowers based on what it knows about me. So it might know that I'm based in Sydney, Australia. So when I ask for something like a flower shop, it's probably going to give me flower shops in Sydney. But, if I, compared to, there's a bunch of probably better flower shops over in the United States, but it knows that I probably don't want to see that. So when I evaluate the visibility of a company with I always go in an incognito window and I remove the complexity of the profile. So now, if I type in, let's see if this works, because I'm coming from Sydney, so it might have my IP address on hand, even though it's using incognito. I don't know how exactly that works. So if I go blessed flower shop, let's try near me. This is a very typical Google keyword. So it knows I'm in Sydney, right? So even though I'm not signed in with ChatGPT, it still knows I'm in Sydney. So that's something that, you really can't take out of the equation. So using terms like near me are going to show very biased results, right? So now let's go to a new one here. And now if I go best flower shop San Francisco, list 5. San Francisco. Yep. It gives me a list of 5 flower shops. So here they are. And it even gives you these little bit of this reasons why they stand out. Now, the interesting thing to me is that when we're using ChatGPT here, it's making decisions to come up with this list of 5 shops, some way. Now, as a marketer, discovering this new channel of large language models and generative AI and conversational AI, I'm trying to think, well, how do businesses show up here? And what's the approach that we should be taking? And my beliefs are as follows. So we'll go to a little diagram here. So I think that search is very, very similar to generative AI or ChatGPT and large language models. So instead of a query in search, we're using what we call a prompt. And I believe this is where you want to show up in response to the customer's prompt, right? So in Google, if somebody goes best flower shops, you want to be the best flower shop and you want to come up in the search results. However, with a prompt, you want to come up in the search results variant of ChatGPT, which is the first flower shop in the conversation. You want to make sure that you're shown up. So how do you do this and what's the value of this is kind of pie in the sky, but you might as well take some best bets because there are some values that you can assign to these keywords based on, how Google Ads works. So for instance, what we just saw was, something like flower shops near me as a query. There's some commercial value to this. So Google evaluates, let's say, off 2 main variables, or as an advertiser, I look at 2 main variables, which is CPC, cost per click, and search volume. And you can also have things like growth, so year-on-year, month-on-month growth, right? Now, what's interesting is if you do the same thing in ChatGPT as a prompt, there is no paid avenue for ChatGPT, so there is no cost per click. So everything that you get from ChatGPT is free for the time being. I believe that ads are coming. And there is search volume, but the data isn't public. So with Google, they have Keyword Planner and they have Google Trends that show you how many people are searching for things like flower shops near me in certain locations. So like maybe on certain public holidays in certain areas, you can see that flower shops near me actually skyrocket. But with ChatGPT, all of this data is hidden for the time being. And that's probably got something to do with the complexity of how people query in ChatGPT. So instead of one query for search, there are a series of queries which we're calling prompts. And getting data on that and then showing it back to advertisers, it seems to be tricky. Like if I could have it from ChatGPT or OpenAI, I wouldn't even know in what format I'd like to have that data, which makes it complex. Because if I'm the customer and I don't know what I want, it's probably really hard for them to understand what they want for the customer. So there is technically search volume, but it's a big question mark. By the way, Google doesn't do a very accurate job of telling you the search volume anyway. They just tell you that there's more than others kind of thing. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I digress. So now we have this new channel, which is focused around prompts rather than queries. And instead of giving you search results, which are tied to CPCs and search volume, we have responses. And they're free, but we have no idea what search volume there is. Now, the only way that I can see and understand the value of competing for certain prompts is just by using the volumes and the CPCs from Google, right? So I can tell you from my own research and some assumption, because I haven't looked up flower shops near me, that's an example I came up with today, that if you type in personal injury lawyer it's going to cost a lot more per click for flower shops near me. So let's say that flower shops near me, the CPC is actually somewhere like $5 a click. And let's say they both have the same search volume, so let's say 1,000 a month. The personal injury lawyer, although it might have the same search volume, I can tell you that they can range for hundreds of dollars. And that's for a single click. So when you look at these, you're like, well, I could come up first for personal injury lawyer, or I could come up first for flower shops near me in ChatGPT, depending on what business you want to start. You either want to be a lawyer or a florist. And you go, well, appearing first as a lawyer is worth more, because in the Google market, which is having its lunch eaten by ChatGPT, you would have to pay $500 to get a click via Google Ads, which are the paid sponsored spots above the organic posts, right? The organic search results. So if you look at that and you say, well, I do want to appear first for personal injury lawyer on ChatGPT when people are searching in my area, well, then there's a value. The value of every click that you get is $500. So if you can find a method to appear first in ChatGPT responses, you are essentially getting hundreds of dollars of clicks for free, right? And that's what SEO was. SEO still is. You get free clicks, and that's why people love organic. But in ChatGPT, you don't have. I would love if they had ads, so you could just buy these clicks, and then they just, you knew what the value was based on how many clicks you got, and how many of them turned into leads, right? But there is no market for buying clicks, and there is no public search volume. So the best we have is Google, right? Now, we now know that we can't do anything like Google Ads with ChatGPT, but we can do something like SEO. You can, in some way, we don't know how just yet, but you can rank first in ChatGPT. And I'm going to explain how I do it. So first thing I do is I go to ChatGPT and I go into an incognito window. Let's say that this is an incognito window, and we'll make it purple just to show that. And I search for a prompt, right? And then I tell it to list a couple of people. Prompt. And then I say list 5. And if it comes up with people, so sometimes when you type in real estate agents, mortgage brokers, buyers agents, it's going to come up with people's names. But if you want to look for brands, you can say list 5 and then 5 companies or brands, right? So that happens. And then you obviously get a list of 5 people as a response. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then your next prompt should be asking it, like, how? Or like, why? And this is the tricky part, where you're now talking to something that used to be like something similar to Google. Imagine you didn't pop up first on Google and somebody else did, and you could ask Google, how are you making this decision? And depending on how well you can draft this prompt, depends on how high quality that response is back. And that's a very, very gray area for ChatGPT, right? So you go how or why, and then ChatGPT will come back with a bunch of variables, and it'll be like, well, A, and then B, then C, then D, then E, then F, and G. That's how I make my decision. You're like, cool. Then you just go and you have to, again, you have to be a little bit of a prompt engineer here, and you have to trial and response to see how exactly the best way to get this answer is. And I've got my own methods, and a bunch of people have theirs. And I basically say, well, there's my company, which is, flashmark.com.au. Using the variables, why didn't I appear? And then it gives you some feedback. And if you're good at understanding the feedback, and if you've prompted to get the feedback via a series of different prompts, so this relates to there, and then this relates to here, you then have somewhat of a ChatGPT visibility strategy. And this is the service that I'm offering now. Like I basically have this prompt, which is, we can call it a Google keyword that I know is valuable on Google. And I run through these, say, once a month at the start of every month, and I'll get this feedback or even a series of action points. And then what will happen is, for that month, I'll work on these action points. So for instance, when I ran Flashmark for Google Ads, when I ran Google Ads Agency Sydney and I listed 5 companies, my company didn't come up first because there are much bigger companies than mine. So I saw that there were 5 in the list, and I was like, how do these companies get on the list? And I don't talk about my company just yet. I don't want to bias the LLM. And then I go, well, now that you've given me the variables, have a look at my company and then stack it up against the variables and give me some feedback, because essentially I want to appear first. And it's like, here you go, right? Now, this can become very, very interesting in a lot of different situations, because if this is one keyword, so Google Ads Agency Sydney, then the feedback and the action points and the variables and the competitors are going to differ for Digital Marketing Agency Sydney, right? So what happens is you get these feedback and action points, and this will be telling you to do, one thing as symbolized by the red column, but then this will be telling you to do some different things symbolized by the blue column. So now you have like 2 sets of action points that you have to deal with. Now, that can be really, really confusing, because keep in mind, this is something for like Google Ads Agency Sydney, Digital Marketing Agency Sydney, and then that differs again when you say Google Ads Agency Australia and then Digital Marketing Agency Australia. So that those 2 keywords can turn into 4 keywords based on differing locations, and then the more longer tail, or the longer you make them, the more feedback and action points you're going to get that are going to seem very, very different. So what I like to do is I like to go and get a couple of keywords, and then I get, let's say, we'll do 4 keywords, let's call it. And then I get this bunch of feedback action points. And this one is going to be a different color. This one's going to be green. And this one is going to be a purple, right? So now I have these different action points, and they are for keyword 1, keyword 2, keyword 3, and keyword 4. And I had to look this up, but essentially what I do from here is I look at them all and I say, they're very different, but there are some similarities. There's something that the LLM is asking me for that is consistent across all 4 of them. So I'll tell you that when I did this when I did this process for my company across a bunch of different keywords, I found that there was one big glaring similarity between them. And it was, first one for all of them was Google partner status, right? And that came up 4 times. mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So now I look at that, and then I say, well, I can only get my Google partner status once for my company. So it's not 4 actions, it's one. And the way you go about understanding the prioritization of what you should do is by first evaluating all the actions across your different keywords that you want to compete for. So here you got Google partner status. You might have case studies. You might have reviews on Google, and then you might have reviews on a directory. And then you see that this one will have case studies down here, and then this one will have reviews on directory here, and then this one will have Google reviews, and then you'll have some random ones, right? Like this one will say feed the dog, and then this one will say go for a walk. These are just examples. And then this one will say, maybe something super unachievable, like manage $100 million of ad spend. And if you're just getting started out, like that's really, really hard to satisfy. And then this last one will say, post 3 forms of social media content. Pieces, not forms. Okay, right? And you go, all right, well, the more keywords I have, the more confusing this becomes, the more action points I have to do, and now I'm overwhelmed. So what you actually really want to do is a frequency analysis. And essentially, what you want to do is determine a priority of what you should complete to satisfy your objective with the least amount of effort. So you're drawing like a value effort matrix, or you're trying to see which category is the most worthwhile to start on. So it's pretty obvious here that if there is something across each of them, then this is going to help you out a lot, because it's asked you for it in 4 different conversations like this, unbiased by the other keyword. And you're like, well, if this comes up so frequently, I should probably prioritize it. And that's something that I actually did. And then when you query it again, let's say you do this in a month's time, the LLM will actually update its opinion of you. And opinion is very interesting as a term, because it's subjective, not objective. Whereas Google didn't really have an opinion of you. You either won the first spot or you didn't. But ChatGPT has contexts, and it has to have an opinion on you. And that's based on a bunch of smart things I don't understand, like probability of next word that's being spat out, right? And depending on where the guy is searching, like you just saw, we're in incognito and you were in Sydney. So it knows more than we think it knows about us, even in different environments. So it's always got some context, and I don't know what exactly it pulls from. But if it's consistent and it's asking you for these things across many, many, many different things, satisfy it, and you'll increase the likelihood that you will appear first in ChatGPT, right? And then you've got this other one, which is like case studies, and you're like, okay, cool, let's do that one, second, or make it like an initiative for, something we can do. And then what's really interesting is that, let's say these are website changes, and typically SEO is about, building content on your website, and Google has some framework for making it. I think it's like EAT or something, EEAT or something like that. And you basically just satisfy the requirements for good content, but then you need to build authority, and that's where backlinks come in. You're like, well, if I'm friends with this guy and he has a lot of friends, then I must be popular. And that's how Google kind of treats backlinks. So if you're on backlinked from different websites and they have a lot of users and a lot of different backlinks, then you're most likely reputable, which is why it was so hard to rank first for Google. But because the LLM is casting judgment on businesses and giving an opinion of what's the best, the requirements are very different from Google. So this, for instance, is very strange in the SEO world. You're you're going to be told that you're going to need reviews on Google, and then you're going to be randomly told about a directory that you have no idea about. And apparently that's the way that ChatGPT makes its decisions. So I can tell you that in Australia, I don't know anyone that goes to the website Clutch, but I was told for my agency that if I wanted to rank higher on ChatGPT, and I'm being told this by ChatGPT, so I don't even know if I can believe it fully, that I should put more reviews on Clutch, right? And I don't have reviews on Clutch. It was right to tell me that I don't have reviews on Clutch. I never had a ambition to get more reviews on Clutch, but I had a profile for some reason at some point. So I was kind of halfway there. Google, I have more reviews. It just didn't care. It wasn't even part of the question with a bunch of other keywords. It wasn't like you need more Google reviews, whereas I thought that was the one I needed most. So I was a little bit like confused. So what I'm finding is that because LLMs train themselves on the entire internet, the content that you create is actually pushing boundaries beyond what we would have created with SEO. So with SEO, everything is focused around your website. But at a certain point, the smarter this thing gets, and the more and more people dive into what makes a better business, and the more information it understands about how people make decisions or how it itself makes decisions, you'll find that it's going to start asking you for content, let's call it content, that is outside of your usual scope. So if I'm an agency and somebody pays me to make blog posts, I can go make blog posts on the website. But all of a sudden, the LLM is telling me to go and sign up to a directory, this specific one, and then build almost a process that's going to encourage more people to get reviews. And then you start seeing that brand building, visibility, trust with the LLM is going to start guiding different forms of content creation than just like text, photos, videos. It's going to be things like sign up to directories, create online calculators, give them a tool. And this is all competitive information for the time being, right? Because this is comparing you from one competitor to the other. And it's not going to have the insight to tell you to do new things. So let's say it looked at all the competitors and they've all got, let's say for mortgage brokers, they've all got a pricing calculator on their website. And then it looks at your website and it's like, you don't have a pricing calculator. You need a pricing calculator. And you're like, sweet, I'll do a pricing calculator just to keep up, right? Just to meet the bare minimum requirements. What it won't tell you is everyone's got a pricing calculator. You need to do something better than a pricing calculator. That's not in its wheelhouse. It's trained on what it knows. I kind of think of it like the reason why Disney is making remakes of popular movies, because we didn't need a live action remake of Mulan. Everyone was happy with the first one. But then because Disney got data and understood that everyone liked Mulan so much, they made the educated guess that if they remade Mulan with a different spin, live action, that the nostalgia would kick in for those people and they would be forced to go see that movie and then they would make enough money. I hope they stop doing that because, movies are supposed to be creative, much like, business content should be. But unfortunately, when you're trying to rank first and people are ranking in front of you, sometimes you have to meet the bare minimum requirements and then start becoming creative. So you start by not reinventing the wheel, and then you do reinvent the wheel. You do some new risky shit, which is what I think Disney should be doing. But instead, there's just so much money in not reinventing the wheel. And I believe that there's that same opportunity here with ChatGPT and LLMs. If you see this video, let me know what you think in the comments. Otherwise, yeah, nothing. Have a good one. Bye.